All right. We're going to do a little special thing today. We're going to be talking about yield and numbers. So we're going to be doing a lot of screen sharing. So please forgive our podcast listeners. You're going to have to watch this live. But before we dive into our awesome topic, how you been, man? Christmas season around. We got the beards going. Everything else.
Not bad. I put out a post yesterday dedicating this one to Patrick Franz. We've had a few discussions about that, but yeah, we had our dress rehearsal last night for our nativity that happens in Calgary. This is the 60th year that they've been doing this live nativity. So it's fun to be part of history. But yeah, I get to play a Wiseman, so I got to pretend to be smart.
Awesome. That's crazy. So one of the things we talk about a lot is buying notes and creating notes and this numbers and that numbers. And what we find is a lot of the people who watch us and reach out to us get lost in the numbers, right? These things are complicated, financial calculators and yield numbers. And we decided for our last show of the year to kind of go back to basics and explain a little bit about what we mean when we talk about why ROI doesn't work out, what's yield, and how does that play in any of this stuff?
Yeah, we had a couple of questions come in, and that kind of spurred us to start thinking about this and how we could explain what we do and why we do it, and why the numbers show us that that's what we should do. And so we thought we'd kind of share that with people, and I think this is going to be very interesting. We'll see how this goes. Live show, so if we make a mistake,
please forgive us if we have some mess ups and stuff like that. And listen, if we're wrong on the math, please call us out on it, right? We have a couple of people in our private group that are listening in and tuning in, because sometimes when you're doing things live, the numbers don't always add up. Thank you, Cindy, for the nice compliment. That's awesome. Thank you over there. So when we talk about this stuff, we have to understand that what is a note? The basics of a note. If you take out a mortgage with your bank, what's it all mean, right? You're taking out a debt on your property, and that's all good. And you get an APR, return, all that stuff, normal stuff. But then we throw in this ROI and yield number. Why are we not on APR? APR encompasses more than just the yield.
Yeah. We're in a kind of a unique situation where, like you say, we all go get mortgages for our own homes when we're buying, but it's not until you start getting into this business that you start looking at the other side of that. What are the banks doing? How are they actually making money? It's an interesting flip, and you got to change your brain on thinking about it a little bit differently and looking at it a little bit differently. So we're going to attempt to kind of show that and show some things that we've figured out and things that we've kind of put in place. And like you said, Dave, if there's a different way to do it, or if we've done something wrong, please let us know. We're more than happy to be corrected and illuminated on what we're missing. So please let us know.
Absolutely. So, first start off with is we want to make sure those who don't know who we are, who know who we are, right? Me and Nathan have been buying notes for over 15 years. We really connected or try to connect with all the note creators as well as note buyers, but bridging that gap, letting the note creators learn more about who we are as note buyers, and allowing the note buyers learn who the note creators are, right? And when we do that kind of stuff for people can do business together all day long, and the marriage happens. But it seems like a lot of the people get confused on what the other side's doing.
And it's really interesting. One of the things that I found really interesting as we've talked to more and more note creators is how we think differently than a note creator thinks. And I found that really interesting because we're both on the same side of the table on this one, but the way that somebody who's creating a note will think about it differently than somebody who's just buying an existing note. And so we're trying to get those two sides together so that we can kind of collaborate and say, look, we'll buy your notes all day long if it's made like this. And they always want a list, and that's tough for us to do because there are circumstances and there are different things that play into it. But we do the best we can to come up with a list of, like, if you do A, B, and C, then we'll buy it at this price. But so we're going to try to attempt to kind of explain a little bit about that and how that works and what we're looking at as note buyers instead of creators.
Yep, absolutely. And just to let you guys know, this is recorded. This will be on our podcast, as well as it's being live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And we have some, of course, some friends chiming in. I see Cody saying, sporting the beard. Yes, we appreciate you reaching out, Cody, and whatnot. So, with that said, when we talk about yield, most people see an amortization schedule, right? And we're going to share some screens here, but they see his amortization schedule and say, well, why at the end of the term does it go lower? Well, I'm only getting $100 on this interest, where in the beginning I was getting most of the money.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So, because it's an interest rate, anytime that you're making a payment, and we'll show this visually so you can see it, but as you start making payments, so let's say your monthly payment is $500 a month. At $500 a month, at the beginning of that loan, you're mostly paying interest and a little bit of principal. With each successive payment, you're paying a little bit less interest and a little bit more principal. So it ends up kind of being a curve that goes down over time. At some point in the life of the loan, there's actually a crisscross where you end up paying more principal than interest. And then for the remainder of that time, you're paying more and more principal and less interest, until at the very end, your last payment is almost completely principal and your interest is almost zero. So it's an interesting thing to look at, and we'll show you what that looks like with an amortization schedule.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we're looking at that. That's an important piece.
Yeah. And some people say, well, at the end of the term, the interest rate must be changing, right? The amount's going down. And we say, listen, take a schedule and say, what is 10% on 100,000 and what is 10% on $100? That's the reason your interest goes down, is because that the interest on the unpaid balance is lower.
Yeah.
It's still 10%, right? It doesn't, the interest rate doesn't change. Your balance, your loan, as it goes down through the amortization schedule, drops, right?
And over time, that the balance starts to drop faster, the closer to the end of the loan you get. But again, your yield is still the same. The interest rate on that note is still the same. So that doesn't change, but just that ratio of principal to interest changes.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last part before we start getting in the thick of things is that, understand the fact that this is a mathematical game, right? This isn't a PDF. It changes with things going on. And shout out to Dave Miller, who actually brought this topic up. And oddly enough, me and Nathan spent 2 calls to kind of get what we want across. So we're going to do our best for our last show of the year. Before we dive into meat, though, if you guys get before your Christmas time and your New Year's, make sure you sign up for DME, which will be happening in May. If you don't know what that is, note buyers, note creators are coming together for 2 days and talk about 2.5 days to talk and network and get together. The tickets are live. It's Nathan's event down in Nashville.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. We've got sponsors coming on board. If you're looking to sponsor something, get on board quick, because we sell out. We've sold out the last couple of years, and if you want to be there as a sponsor, make sure you get in early. But yeah, we're super excited. We've got a very interesting range of topics coming up for next year's conference. We're kind of leaning into the idea of diversification. So different ways that you can approach notes, and we'll have different experts in those fields talk about what they've been doing over the last however long in their specific niche of notes. And so we're very excited about that. It's going to be a very interesting conference. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. So we're going to be doing some sharing screen here for a minute, guys. We wanted to ask the crowd, and put us in the chat again, YouTube, make sure you subscribe and all that stuff, is do you ever calculate how much is paid on a 30-year loan, right? As a buyer, you may do it, but you ever look at your own note and say, what happens if? And you'll be astonished, right? I think people are flabbergasted when they look at this stuff and say, whoa. And I'm going to tell you right now, every penny over the original amount is interest. It's gains, right? Yeah. And when we buy these things, we want to make sure we make every penny of that interest. So if your new creators are looking at it, we have a video replay of it, 14 points. Do your best to get the borrower to pay servicing fees so we don't get hammered on that monthly fee and allows them to buy that note at a higher price. So let's go to our shared screen here. Let me bring up the Zoom and show you guys what we're looking at. Oop, there we go.
Everybody wants to do some math right before Christmas. It's perfect.
Yeah. Hopefully we can see that screen. If you have any questions, if you have a problem, let me know, and we'll go from there. Hopefully you guys can see it. If you can't, Nathan, I'm going to send you the link just in case we can't. I think the way we have it set up, it may be problematic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop share. Sorry, guys, for those who are doing it. Nathan, I'm going to send you the link just so you could open it up and sharing your screen, because I'm going to have a problem on my side here with what we're doing here and the way it's set up. So give me 1 second. All right. So while Nathan's bringing it up, we wanted to show you guys how yield changes everything. I see Jay making a comment regarding that's why you accelerate note to purchase your home. That's awesome, right? And whatnot. So hopefully you guys can see the screen. I'm going to take that off so you can see it. All right. We're going to dive into this thing. If you have problems, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll go from here. So when we do this,
let's do that.
There we go. All right. So when we look at this stuff, we look at the fact of this is showing you a ton of information of an amortization schedule. Now, we did a copy paste so we don't screw up any numbers here. You get an idea of what it looks like, right? So we look at the fact that the amortization schedule starts at month 0, goes all the way down. Now, when we do this, what does this mean for everyone else, right? This means the fact that when we buy this note, we're buying in a certain period of time inside this note period. Okay? We may be buying in month 0, maybe buying at month 100. Why does that matter? We're going to get into what that difference is. So I'm just going to do it on top here, a quick thing, and I'm going to show you guys what the total right is on this. So we see the fact that total payment on this note, $180,000, right? This is a $56,000 original balance note, and they're going to pay 180 grand, 130,000 or so, right? It's crazy. 125,000, 23,000 in interest. Sorry, it is nuts what's going on here. So when we talk about this,
over the 30 years, the total that the borrower is going to pay is 180,000, even though the balance is only 59.75. Every payment, what's the payment? It's 474 for $500 a month.
Yep.
So over 30 years, that adds up to $180,000.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever had this, Dave, where I was doing an origination way back in like probably 2011, 2012. And as part of origination, you send them an amortization chart. And so I sent it and they went, "What? What is this?" And they like freaked out. They're like, "What kind of scam is this? You're trying to make us pay $180,000? Yeah. And I was like, no, that's just how it works. Like over time, you're paying interest and principal. I tried explaining it to them and they thought I was trying to pull something over on them and they just couldn't let it go. And so they didn't end up buying the house. But I just found that really interesting. Like I don't know how many people actually stop and look at an amortization chart anytime you've borrowed money at an interest rate. If you actually do this exercise and be like, "Oh, that's why I don't buy stuff with a credit card," you know what I mean? Or that's why I don't carry a balance credit card.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
So when we look at this stuff, one of the questions that Dave Miller asked us is like, does it matter if you bought the tail or the beginning? Absolutely does. Right? Yeah. What we find out is that it matters where you buy it at. Why is that? Because where do you get the most interest? The beginning. Because if you want to sell this note, and if you bought it month 1, and you want to buy it at a certain yield, right? And I'm going to put it here, a real quick number here. If I want to create this, and I want to buy it at a certain rate, say I'm going to buy this thing at a 14% rate, and I know the fact that there's 359 payments left, and the payment is $500. Right? I'm going to buy this thing at a $42,000 purchase price in M4 there, right? And the reason being is there's 360 payments left. What happens in from first payment, month 1 to month 12? How much difference is that UPB, the unpaid balance? Nothing.
Yeah, it's $300.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to sell partials, you can sell partial every year after year, and you're really not giving up. If you want to buy partial, this is the perfect time because you're getting a lot of the interest and not the principal. It's not paying down as fast, right?
Yeah.
That's the key here, is when you do it. Now, if you put it out and say, I'm going to buy for 3 years or 4 years, you can find out when it starts curving, as you see in the curve screens, what it looks like. The curve screen will show you when the principal and interest changes. And when that happens, that's when selling it makes it difficult, because the principal gets paid out much faster and it drops in the value of the note itself. So you have to buy the tail at a much bigger discount because you don't have many payments left. So note creators, selling at the beginning is great for you, right? You can sell a thing 5 years of payments partials and make it happen, because you're going to get it back and have most of the principal still there. You're going to get your money back and get the yield as well.
And as for somebody who's borrowing money to do this, so in my fund, we're paying our investors a set interest rate. So for me, actually, a longer loan is better. So a 30-year loan is better than a 20-year loan. Why? Because it takes longer for the principal to drop on a 30-year loan than it does on a 20-year loan. On a 20-year loan, the principal goes down much faster. So I can hold on to a 30-year loan for longer than I can hold on to a 20-year loan and resell it at some point in the future, get my capital, whatever I paid for it, I can get all that capital back out, and still selling it as a good yield to somebody else. So for me, a longer term, I'll hold it for a year or 2 or 3, depending on the note, depending on the rest of the numbers that are behind it. And then I'll resell it, get my capital back out, because again, it's borrowed money. So that's my investor's money that I got to get back out. And then I'll turn it around into another note.
Yeah.
If it's my own money, maybe I don't care. If it's my own money, maybe I want to hang on to it forever and I'll just let it go. And that's, as they pay off naturally, that's the point where I'll recycle the capital and then go buy another.
But you could also hold it for 5 years, let the fund, and then sell it. And because it's the beginning of the note, there's still a lot of months left, and you can get that more money because it's still a higher percent of interest to principal in the amortization. If there's only 10 years left, and you literally have 10 years left, and you hold for 5 years and try selling it, it significantly drops because of where it's at and how much interest is building up on a month-to-month basis, because there's only 10 years left on it. Now, for the first 10 years, if you want to buy and sell in 5 years, you're going to make a ton of money, because the person buying it is still going to buy it, because the UPB, as you can see, at month 120, and just in comparison, if you go down, if you click on my little head on top of the spreadsheet up there, you'll see it. I see the fact that this whole thing, 51,000 out of 56 after 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. So if you bought sold the first, if you hold it for 10 years and sold it, you have a ton of UPB left. You can now sell it again and still get a lot of it, because there's a lot of balance there. And the interest is still pretty high.
Yeah.
Right. So we'd love to hear some questions from the crowd. I see some things coming in now from Jay and Joseph and all that stuff. I see Jay saying
really
from
depends
Facebook
on what you're trying to accomplish here. If you're looking to hang on to it and then still get your money back out and be able to turn it around, great. If you're just looking for set it and forget it, it is a depreciating asset. You got to make sure you understand that. But over time, I think when I first started, I haven't looked it up since I first started, but way back in 2010 or whatever it was, the average time that somebody lived in a property was 7 years, where they would live in a house and then resell it, go move somewhere else. What that means is anytime that they sell the house and move, you as the lender get paid off. So the reality of you holding on to it for 30 years is probably pretty small. Does it happen? Yeah, of course. But generally speaking, people don't stay in one place for 30 years. Not like they used to. People move around. And so and I don't know, like I say, I haven't looked it up in a long time, what the average is. And I'm sure that has changed over time, but the principle is still the same, that the likelihood that you're going to keep it for 30 whole years, probably pretty low. So if you want to buy a 30-year loan and then hang on to it until it naturally refinances, great. Or you can be a little more proactive about it and, calculate exactly where you need to be, at what point can you resell it and get your capital back out and turn it around and do all those kinds of things.
Absolutely. I see. You tell your buyers to pay cash so they don't pay interest. Yeah. I think people forget the fact there's interest in loans, right? I see another comment from Joe over on LinkedIn. We had a guy in our classes who asked why people don't simply pay cash. Yeah. Most of the people who are getting involved in owner finance and seller finances, the borrowers don't have the cash. That's the whole purpose of this, right? It'd be great to not have to worry about paying interest, but you're buying a loan, or the borrower needs a loan to buy the house. It's not free, right?
Or the borrower, I've heard this several times, where the borrower either can't go to a regular bank or they don't want to. And there's a lot of people that just don't want to deal with regular banks, so they would rather do a seller finance deal.
Yeah. Another comment from Joe is, under what condition term would you consider purchasing it the last 3 years of a 30-year loan? It's all about the numbers. We're just telling you that the discount gets greater because of the tail end.
So let's do an example. Here, I'll bring up this.
Yeah, we go.
Come up?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So, whoops. There we go. So this is a 30-year note, 360 months at a 10% interest rate, balance of $100,000. Payment is $877 a month. So let's say they've paid all the way. There's, what did we say? 3 years left?
3 years left. Yep.
So if there's
327 or 357, sorry.
So there's 36 months remaining.
Perfect.
So that means the balance on that note with 3 months remaining is $27,197. I want at least a 12% yield. So I put in 12 and then hit the magic button. So I'll pay $26,400 for that.
Yep.
So that's not bad. That's actually pretty close to what the balance is at that point. So that's decent. But just to give you an idea, that's the determining factor, is how much do I need to pay?
The interest rate has to be close. It also matters, Joe, what that interest rate of that loan is. If that's a 3% loan, that impacts what our purchase price can be all day long. So for those who call, we had a phone call this morning, someone asking questions. Well, what's the biggest factor that matter when you buy notes? Your term or my interest rate, outside my collateral and security, right? In the numbers fashion is, what is the term? What is the interest rate alone? Mm-hmm. Right? If you're telling me it's a 50-year loan at a 2% interest rate, be ready for a huge discount, because the time value of money kicks in.
Right. So let's do that same calculation with the 3% interest rate.
Loan.
So then I'm going, there's 3 years left. I want a 12% interest rate. Hit the magic button. I didn't do that right, but it's close enough. That'll give you the idea. So 12,600. So remember, the balance at that point was around 27. I'm going to pay you 12,600 for that. So I'm paying far less, and that's not going to be exactly right, because we skipped a.
We're on the fly here, right?
It's going to take a huge discount.
So Cindy said the average person to jump homes right now is 8 years. Okay, well, Cindy knows what she's talking about. We'll definitely go with that.
There you go.
We had another comment from Marco, but an assumption that 3.5% loans out there will stick around longer than 7 years. Okay, we're on the same time frame. So if you're investing with a self-directed IRA, you own a 30-year note, you sell 5-year partial, you have to claim the majority of the partial sales interest. Yes. We won't get into the accounting part of this, but yes. So if you have any interest on a loan that you're collecting, you're going to have to pay interest taxes on it. So yes. So unless the Roth, then we're talking different area. So I see Warren Ginn over on LinkedIn. Compare yield to cash and cash return when looking at these deals. Cash and cash is a different formula, different factor. I tell people, if you're doing your own money, feel free to cash on cash on ROI. Have fun with it. But if you're leveraging any kind of capital, I promise you that your lender's not saying I want cash on cash. They're probably giving you an interest rate at 7, 6, 5, 10% a year. Well, you have to play with apples and apples and say, okay, if that's the case, what are my returns?
Yeah.
Right. And then if you want to say, okay, I want to use my IRA. Well, if I could put my IRA in the stock market, they don't use cash on cash, right? They use returns. And how do you compare that? So you really want to stay, you can figure out cash on cash, but I just highly encourage people to really kind of pay attention to make sure that they're playing with apples and apples. I get it. Cash and cash is a very easy formula.
Yeah. And if you want to do the cash on cash, you're making $180,000 over 30 years. Divide that by 30.
Yeah, you bought it for X dollars.
Yeah, bought it for X.
The 180 minus how much you paid for it and divided by 30. You want to do it that way? I get there are some nuances. You really should carry the interest, right? Because you're getting your principal back. I get that, and whatnot. But without getting in the thick of things, the real focus here is, why is yield a big deal here? And what happens with these amortization schedules? And how much you get paid, right? So
do we have that chart? Do we have the curve chart?
We can. I don't think we have it on here, but we can definitely show it. Okay. If you have your calculator, do you have it on there?
No, it doesn't show it used to show the curve chart. Now it just does like a different looking chart that I don't like as much. Let's see
if we can show this real quick. So guys, if you ever Google amortization
it just says that
curve graph, like that. You're going to see an idea what it looks like, and just do it. You're going to see a quick idea why it changes everything. So, and what happens with that. So one of the questions we got asked was, if you buy a note, do you ever hold it for term? I calculate in my calculator 3-year, 5-year, 2-year, 3-year, and 5-year sale price. Why is that? For multiple reasons. I'm most likely not going to hold a loan more than 5 years. I think the longest we ever held one was 8 years. And to me, it made no sense to hold it if the numbers well. So as we go down through the amortization schedule, it makes it worse and worse to sell because it's flipping less interest and more principal, and the borrower's paying the principal down faster. So it's not as valuable because the interest is going away. Your profit, your interest is your profit. Now, if you buy a discount, part of your principal is profit, but most of your interest is your profit in that world. So you want to get as much of that in there. As it starts dropping down, the interest starts reducing because the UPB is reduced. And that starts happening quicker and quicker and quicker, as you'll see in charts, right? And it's amazing when you look at that kind of stuff. Go back to some of the questions we got going on here. From Jay as well. David, what are the yield projecting your note sale price at 2, 3, and 5? I'm going to tell you what I do, what Nathan does, what you do are all different. Yeah. That matters what you do. If it's your own capital and you're trying to beat a 7% or 5% bond, make it 6, 7, 8. I'm going to guarantee you guys, if you're buying notes with your own capital and you can do less than us on our buy price, you're going to beat us every time. Yep. We don't have a magic wand, right? If we're borrowing money at, say, 15%, we have to beat 15%. But if you don't have to beat anything, undercut us. Get your deal at 8%, 9%. That makes sense. So it depends on what you're doing. So good question, though. Yeah, but when I project out what I do in my calculator, say, okay, if I'm going to hold this note for 2 years, I'm going to sell it at an X yield as a performing note at say a 10, 11, 12. I'm going to project out, and I'm going to, what I do in my calculator is say, okay, and we teach in our class, in the advanced classes, I want to buy it in that first 2 years. I want to buy it and make sure I get an X yield, whatever that return is. And then we turn around and say, okay, fine. In 3 years, I want to hold it for 3 years and get an X return at a sale price of selling it at 10 yield. And then we go on 5 years. And then we take the worst of the three and say, which scenario is the worst case scenario if we do this kind of stuff? Now, this also encompasses if it defaults, everything goes into play. I just talked to someone the other day that all they use is a financial calculator to buy notes. And I asked the question, what happens if the note defaults? And the answer is, I don't know. And that's troublesome, right? I see Mr. Gomez over here said we can go to a website, vertex42.com. They have schedule. I'll put in the video here for you on LinkedIn. But yeah, you can definitely go anywhere. Just Google amortization curve graph, and you'll see a whole bunch of images on how it just starts going, right? It crosses over so that the principal is higher balance than your interest at a certain period of time. We tried on this calculator, and those who don't know, I'm a crazy spreadsheet guy, to figure out where in that section does it actually change. So what we did on column I, that whole column over there, is we figured out the change of UPB during the period of time, and when does it really change? And as you can see, it starts off at changing at about like a 0.1, 0.01, and as you get down farther and farther, it changes dramatically to a point where it's changing 1% in a blink of an eye.
And as you get down, go. And right in this case, right around month 277, now you've got your interest and principal right there is where it flips. Then you're paying more principal than interest between 277 and 278. So out of 360 months. So it takes a while, as you can tell, but it does eventually cross over. And that's this scenario. If it was a different interest rate, if it was a different amortization time, like a different term, that's going to change. So who knows? And that's why you got to do the calculation.
And as you scroll down, Nathan, you start seeing that balance, that column I starts going crazy from 1, and then it goes nuts to 2. And that's a difference between the balance of last month and the balance of that month. And as you can see, it goes crazy to the end where it just starts jumping 10, 12, 13. And that tail end
last year, it just goes up like crazy.
Yeah. And that's because the balance of the deal goes. So for those people who are saying, when should you buy? Your best time to buy note is the beginning of it, right? You could buy the tail, but it becomes problematic. It becomes more of a discount than if it was the beginning of the note. Because if you want to sell it in 3 years, it's hard.
You could argue that if you're buying a tail, they're going to pay off early. It's not likely that they will just run it all the way through. They may pay off like the last year early, something like that. If you do that, then your return actually goes way up. And so
I was about to ask you, what happens if you get a payoff and the yield's a 30-year loan? What happens in a 30-year loan when it gets paid off in year 5?
Yeah, payoffs are great.
Right. And the reason being, guys, the definition of yield is what's your annual return till maturity, like a savings bond or any kind of bond. Now, maturity is in 30 years. What happens if maturity is not in 30 years, it's in 10 years, because you got to pay off in that period of time and all your money's back to you, right? It dramatically increases your yield to know the fact you got a payment string of 120 payments, and all of a sudden at that point in time, you got to pay off. Right? I'm going to do some quick math here so I can show people what it looks like, but it is unbelievable what happens. So if you are looking at the fact that does payoffs help or not help, they absolutely do help. So is selling a note, right? It can increase your yield because you're getting a lump sum of money in a faster period of time, and you got it earlier in the time period. That even helps even more. So, boom. So that's a question that most people ask: is what happens when that goes on? So you're going to look at the fact you're going to get a return. So I did some quick math, and this isn't exactly correct because of number of payments, all stuff. But you're going to get a lump sum in this carry scenario. If you bought it in month 1 and you got a payoff of $51,000 and you received all this interest, right? You're going to get a much higher yield than that little simple thing because the return got faster. You didn't get all the principal from the borrower. You got a lot more interest. In this case, your interest in this one field, E4 through E123, was $54,000. So you're going to actually have $54,000 plus this 51, $106,000 in payments in 10 years.
That's good.
Yeah.
You want that. This is why we encourage payoffs.
Yeah. So payoffs, refis, selling the note, all those juice up your returns.
Yeah.
It makes things different, right? So Marco asked a question, how do you guys underwrite notes with short balloons 3 to 5 years in existence?
Honestly, I don't buy those.
Yes. Why don't you buy them? I'm same boat you are, but
I don't buy them because there's a few different things. So let's say I'm looking at a loan where, so like a lease option is a great example. Lease option where they're making payments and in the deal at year 3, the deal is that they go and refinance and pay you off. My experience has been that never happens. I've never had one successfully pay off. Not that I've bought a ton of them, but in the handful that I have purchased, it doesn't happen. So that's number one. So that expectation of getting paid off at year 3, as it's written in the lease option contract, I've never had it happen. And actually, we had this discussion, didn't we, in one of our private calls?
Yep.
And same thing. I don't think anybody had ever had somebody actually pay off at year 3, like it says in the contract.
Most time it's refi, right? That's the hope and pray. My problem is what happened they don't, right? It just makes it messy, makes it problematic. And as I know Marco knows, if this is a Dodd-Frank thing, that has to be a business loan. That can't be a consumer loan. So for those who are creating notes, you can't create a balloon within the first 60 months.
Yeah, that's reason number 2. If it's a consumer loan and there's a balloon written in, that's not compliant with Dodd-Frank. And so I don't want to get into that. And so that's the number 2 reason why I just wouldn't even buy one of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
They tend to be messy.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about this stuff, it matters. So when you guys are looking to sell notes and you say, is it worth it to me to sell a note? We can't answer that question.
Yeah.
What do you need the money for?
What are you after?
Yeah. What changes things? But when we buy notes, we look at these things. If I buy it and sell it in 3 years versus hold on over 30 years, I can buy it typically at a little bit less discount because I don't have to worry about holding it to get my money back. Right? I can sell it in 3 years when the principal and interest are more even, where it's not as valuable to me anymore because I got most of the interest out and I sell it to you at 10, 11, I can juice up my returns. Right. And that's often what we do.
Yeah. And if you go back to that original example, like we're talking about, I bought the note when it had a 56.9 balance. A year later, I'm going to sell it when there's a balance of, where is it?
56,740.
56,740. That's a $200 difference. So when I'm talking about buying and selling, I don't know what I paid for this note. I paid, let's call it 45. And my yield at that was like 12.29 or something like that. You know what I mean? I won't do the calculation, but just give you an idea. A year later, when there's only a $200 difference in the principal balance, it's very easy for me to resell that at 45,000 again. So all of my capital comes back to me.
And all interest.
Right.
Mostly interest.
And the buyer of the note, the one that I sold it to, they bought it at a 12.25. You know what I mean? So it's a very easy thing for me to resell it near the beginning there. So
so I added up. I see the fact from month 1 to month 12, total principal is $234.
Yeah.
So your principal dropped $234. And in that time period, you collected over $4,000 in interest.
Right.
That's why you're buying it and selling in a year is probably beneficial for you.
Yeah.
Go buy another one and get all interest, and you sell this thing at the same price.
Yeah.
Right.
Or can I push that and go to 2 years where it's dropped another $100, $200?
Yep.
Probably. So I look at that and I say, so how long do I have to hold on to it before I need to sell it so that I can then get my capital back out? That's the kind of thing I look at.
I see the fact that in month 24, payment 24, line 27, a total of $666, line 27.
Yeah.
$666 in principals paid off. That's it in 24 months. In the meantime, you collect $11,000 in interest. Now, if you want to sell this at a 12 rate, it's $48,000. But you've already collected $4,000.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, with rounding, if I bought it for 48 and then I'm going to resell it for 48, everybody's happy. Everybody wins.
Yeah. So this is why it matters when you calculate this. Now, if we are going to hold this for 10 years, we understand the fact you get most of the interest and then you're going to sell it, right? But these are some of the higher level people when they figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and how they're going to buy and sell, right? To me, it makes sense. If you want to make the most amount of money selling the note, you want to sell the beginning of it because that person's going to pay a lot for it, right? As it goes down, they're going to pay less and less for that note because of the amortization schedule, where the tail becomes the least attractive because of that reason. Now, you can play with this all you want, and I'm going to tell you guys, I would do it. Try it, play with it, play with the financial calculator, play with the amortization schedule, and just try different things. You're going to be astonished at what you find out, right? Making sure your calculator looks at something and says, whoa, if I do this and this, you're going to find things that we didn't explore. I encourage you guys to try taking a look at that.
Which is real quick. This is why you've probably heard us say this before. You have to have your own calculator. Yes. So, you can use whatever calculator. If you're going with the spreadsheet calculations, great. If you're using just a regular calculator, great. But understand how it works and play with it. And eventually, I hope you're building out some kind of a spreadsheet one where you can start fiddling with the numbers and yourself for what you're after, because everybody's approach is just a little bit different. And so that's why your own calculator is going to make a big difference to your business. That's an additional plug for that.
With that said, I had a call yesterday with an investor who said that, they used the financial calculator and stuff, and they said they bought on UPB. And we went through the whole conversation of why you never buy on this percentage of UPB because it's dangerous. The interest rate changes, your term changes, everything. Please, guys, if you're buying on percentage UPB, it's easy to do. I get that, but you're going to get yourself in a bad spot, especially if you're borrowing other people's money. It's bad. Right.
Hey, so real quick, we had another question. I think this is a good place to fit that in. So I had an email come in, I think it was earlier this week or last week. How do you calculate, if you're hanging on to a bunch of notes, how do you calculate your net worth on that? And we kind of talked about this briefly, but we didn't come up with an answer. So I'm curious, David, what would you say? What number are you going to use? What do you look at for what's your net worth?
This is something we do in our IRA often, right? You kind of figure out what the value of your assets are. And my old rule of thumb is it's value what the UPB is. That I can sell this today at the UPB and sell it. Is that realistic? No.
Right.
Most people are not going to buy that, but that's a kind of round number, right? Yeah. And I'd say that my value of the asset is that of the debt that's owed. However, on the market street, that doesn't compute, right?
Right.
So you got to flip over and say, okay, what can I sell? Just like a piece of property, if I want to hot sell this thing, what can I sell this thing for in a second, in 30 days? And that to me is your real true net worth on your notes. Saying if I want to sell this note, I'm going to shoot for an 8% sale price. And what can I sell right now at 8% yield that I can guarantee you? Reverse that. I want to sell this thing at a 15 yield, right?
Yeah.
Because 8 yield's going to give me the lowest. No one's going to bid. But if I sell this at a 15, everyone's going to jump on it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to sell this thing at a 15 yield. To me, that's a hot sale. And I explain, hey, listen, something happened. I need capital. I'm selling at 15%. And most likely for note creators, that's what you guys should do. That you're going to go get a 30% return on fix and flip property, sell it at a 14, 15, get your money out quick, and then move on to a better deal. Because really, you're then you're borrowing at 15 and go get 30. That works every day of the week.
Yeah.
So how would you do it?
This is where it gets a little bit funky, because I totally agree. That's how I would do it. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, okay, how I calculate it today is different than how I would have calculated it 5 years ago when I was buying all non-performers. In that case, a percentage of UPB was useless. Yes. That was a dead number. It didn't mean anything. So it's not an easy question to answer, because if you've got, let's say, even in your portfolio, say you've got 10 notes. If one of those is non-performing or two of those are non-performers, that's going to be a different thing. That percentage of UPB at that point doesn't really matter, because you're not collecting anything on that. So then you got to start looking at, well, what's the property value? Same thing. If I had to fire sale this, what's the kind of my drop dead, value that I could resell this property at? Yeah. So it's a tricky one. There's no, I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. But
I don't think there's an easy answer for non-performing. Performing is a lot easier, right? I think it goes back to, what can I sell as non-performer on the market? And that's typically what it is. That's probably the best way to calculate it. Yeah. But I tell you that everyone would bid that differently. Performing notes, people would bid differently, but not dramatic, right?
Right.
We're non-performing. Right. Most people don't have the calculators you and I have, where every state's different, costs are different for every state, and most people just use like a flat number for every state. And Texas is the same as Ohio, which is not, but I know most people do calculate that way, unless you take a classic we have. And you turn around and say, okay, listen, if I do this, what happens in Ohio? Where I'm going to have to wait 12 months or 18 months. All that kind of comes into play. Your taxes come into play and all that stuff. And that changes my bid versus someone else who goes, okay, I'm going to calculate it at 80%. We're not going to be the same market. For performing notes, typically it's the same thing. Nathan wants 12, I want 13. And that's typically what a performing note difference is. Who has a lower threshold, right? Yeah. But also who can close faster and who's not window knocking, checking out things.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? I've bought notes before from people specifically because I wanted to have more of that relationship where we're buying and selling. And so that could play into it. I mean, there's lots of factors, but, anyway.
Yeah. And with this amortization schedule we talked about before is partials. If you are looking to do partials, if you're able to get this note at a 12, 13 yield, go sell a 10% partial and you're going to make out. I mean, it makes sense to sell if you can get a lower return, because then you're borrowing 10 to make 12, and that person you're going to get more money for that note if you sell it at 10 versus 12. It just does. The math works out.
One more thing on the partial. So we've had this discussion several times. For me, it doesn't make sense to buy a partial.
And why is that?
In the fund. So again, I'm always looking at my investors' capital and how am I going to make sure that that is protected and that I'm not having to come out of pocket to pay them back. So when I buy a partial, typically it's going to be 5 years or less, typically. So let's look at a 5-year term there. So I buy a partial for 5 years. I'm going to hang on to it for 60 months. At the end of that 60 months, I have nothing to resell. It's just I've collected payments for 5 years and now it's done. And I give the note back to whoever I bought it from. So for me, there's nothing to resell. There's no way to get the capital back out. The only way that that could work is if I bought it at a good enough yield that I would set aside a portion of each monthly payment to go back towards that capital. The problem with that is then I've got a whole bunch of dead money sitting on the sideline as I'm bringing it in that is just sitting there doing nothing. And that for me, that I just can't stomach that. I just got to be doing something. So that's, it gets, again, it's just because I'm borrowing money, essentially, it doesn't work. And so that's where I'm coming from. So for those who are in that kind of a situation, something to consider. And if I'm missing something, please let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I'd like to hear from more of you guys who are creating notes, what this matters. I hear from I talked to no creator this morning and he says, the property is in great condition. The property is this, property is that. The numbers matter. The type of property matters. the functionality of the note and how it's constructed, right? And there's a big misnomer going around that you can create less than 3 notes and not underwrite. Guys, please underwrite every borrower. If they're on occupants, the RMLO rules are different, right? That's a totally different ruling. But as we talk about in our buy calculator that we have a class on, and there's a link inside the chat that you can click, and I'm going to see about running something in January. We're going to see what happens there. Is it matters what state it's in. It matters if it's created. It matters where location is. It matters all that kind of come in place. And at the end of the day, we go back to the amortization schedule. This is our bottom line factors. If this is a 2% note, we have discounted a lot. And then everything else come to play. So if you are a creator note, the first thing you should telling us is where it's located, what's your interest rate, what's the term, and what kind of property is it? Is it land? Is it a residential, commercial? At that point, I can simply say, I'm not interested or am I interested? That's it. Telling me the fact that you rehabbed the last year or the fact that you fixed and flipped it. The other factor is if it's a wrap note, that also is a big change. If you're wrapping around a sub 2, that changed a lot too.
I've had people talk about telling me how much equity there is and stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's great, but it doesn't make it more valuable. But those are the kinds of things that we're trying to come together on so we can understand each other. And
absolutely,
having 50% equity, that sounds awesome. If it's a performing note, that really doesn't make any difference to me. Yep. If it's a non-performer, that's a totally different story. But if it's a performing note, a ton of equity doesn't help. It doesn't make it more valuable.
We had a question from CD Willie. I don't know why it's not popular in the chat here, but if you're reselling a note, you'll have to take a discount on it because the yield is less than the next time around, correct? I'm not sure what next time around means. If that's the case, can you expect to get back what you paid for the purchase? For example, you buy a $45,000 note, hold it for a few years, and resell for $45,000. Where's the discount? Right? If in our case example, what Nathan has here, you're buying at a 45 and selling at 45, and the reason you're doing that is because the amortization schedule is mostly interest.
Yeah.
In the beginning.
And the discount is calculated on the principal balance, not what I paid for it versus what you paid for it. So the discount is a percentage of the UPB, kind of. Careful what I say there.
Yeah.
But it's based on the unpaid principal balance. That's you're discounting on that, not on I paid 45, therefore I should sell it to you for 43.
Yeah.
No.
Let's go to the top real quick, right? Look at it. Figure the fact that we bought it month 1, right? And we're going to say it at a 12 yield, and we have 359 payments left, and the payment's 500, right? We're going to buy this thing at 48,595.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're going to go to month 12, right? Which is 15 at 48. That same number is at 12%, right? And it's, So I'm going to buy for 48. I'm going to sell for 48.4, 48.5 or 48.6 almost, and 48.4. Right? The UPB didn't change much, but my return on this thing, if I bought it for 48.6 and I'm going to sell for 48.4. So this number here and this number here are the two numbers I'm looking at.
And for me, I'm probably going to round that. So I bought it for 48.5 and then I'm going to resell it for 48.5. And it's, $70 off on the sale side. I don't think anyone's going to blink at that. That's, it's $70 less.
And you collected $5,000 in interest or so,
right?
Or a little less than that, but.
So that's how I would look at it. And somebody might come back and say, no, 48,432. Okay, fine. I'll give up $70 on the deal if I need to.
CD, I hope that helps you out, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the math here. It's all about, for me, it's visually seeing this work out.
Yeah.
Now, if we go to 120 payments, I'll let you click on my head in a second. Click on my head now. PV at same 12%, divided by 12. And then there's 240 months of payments left. Pay amount is 500. 48, 45, 4. Okay. Not much change at all. Why is that? Because it's all interest. The principal balance is still high. Right?
Yeah.
This changes dramatically as everything else goes down. Right? Now, let's say you're able to buy this at 13 yield. This changes everything now. You're able to sell it at 12 later. You're able to buy it at a lower discount to get that number work out. Right. Hope that helps you a little bit. Understanding. Play with the numbers.
Yeah.
You'll be understanding. I have a training for $100, whatever. It's a video training on doing formulas inside spreadsheets, or get yourself a financial calculator and play with the numbers. Right? So learn how to work these things. Note buyers and note creators. This isn't just note for note buyers. And learn. Maybe hold this note for a year before you sell it. Maybe not. Maybe say, listen, I'm not going to sell the whole note. I just want to sell the first 10 years. Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
Right? So, again, I put in a thing, a link for a class we're looking to run, and let me know if you guys want to get in all details. It's in the Bitly link as well as you get our information. Reach out. So, we're getting to that 1 hour kick. Let's go back to two of us and let's chat for a minute before we and share with everyone what we're going to be getting to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, next fall, we're probably going to go over our goals for 2025. We haven't fine-tuned that yet. However, we want to hear from you guys what topics, issues, concerns you guys have. We just had a nice call on our private group about debt license, which we haven't done the show in a while. For you guys who are creating notes, make sure you understand your debt license in your state. That's huge. Because if you're holding a note in North Carolina and you created it, you need to have a license. Even if you use an RMLO, you need to have a license to hold it down. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff like that, as well as bringing on other special guests to talk about things like that. But we also want to encourage you guys to give some topics, some suggestions, email us over. And if we explain something that you didn't understand it's key. I did want to, before we disconnect, I think Hannah's jumping on from Miami. Hannah's running the Win Group special. So in the Women in Notes group, it will be happening soon. Feel free to reach out. Let me see if I can bring up that link. Thank you for reminding me, hon. But if you're a woman and you're looking, Patrick says bearded brand. Yes. So if you can, feel free to check this out. It is Women in Notes. It looks like it will be a notes retreat in 2025. It will be, trying to find a date for you, March 27th through the 30th of 2025. It'll be in Summer Range. Make sure you reach out to, I'll put the link in the chat and comments and the YouTube and all that stuff. Feel free to take a look at that and see if it fits you. If you're interested, if you're curiosity, please feel free to reach out and do it. So I put that in the chat for you guys.
Talking to Hananda about that, it sounds really great, actually. Yep. But it's set up really as a retreat. So they've got spa treatments and they've got all kinds of pampering things at the same time as a real working retreat where they're going to go and have some time to kind of recenter.
Please and reach out and just really learn about it.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
But please, guys, again, tell your friends about the show. If you have some things we want to cover, we're going to bring on more special guests next year. We're going to be exploring a little bit more things. We want to get some feedback. We don't get much feedback from you guys. We appreciate the compliments. We want to drill in things that maybe we overlooked, maybe something you just didn't get, right? We can bring on the guests and talk about it, but we need your feedback and what we're doing. I encourage you guys to get out to DME, get out to the Win Group, and jump in and learn. Again, the Bitly link has a link to a project I'm working on in January. We'll see what happens from there. But either way, it's been a great 2024. I've learned a whole lot of information, and I continue to learn. I continue to appreciate people jumping on and sharing things. We just learned the other day, someone didn't know you can't put a deed in lieu inside of a note.
Right.
You can't do that. You can't have it out in the pocket, deed in lieu, as much as every one of us Would have loved to do it during modification time when we modified everything. It would have been awesome. Can't do it. But learn. Feel free to reach out. Be honest. Be open. Don't know something, ask. Right? Yeah. Nathan has a Facebook group. We have a Facebook group. LinkedIn, YouTube, everything. Ask, reach out, email us. Use the link, get our information. Anything else you want to share before we disconnect?
Oh man, it's been a great year. A really good year. And you know, I've actually changed a little bit. I've modified a little bit the kinds of notes that I'm looking at and things, partially because of what we've been doing here.
Yeah.
It's been really very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to next year. It's going to be a really good one. We'll get into goals next time, but 2020.
We have some special things coming up that we're holding off telling people about right now. Some things in the works, and see what happens from there. We encourage you guys, sign up for the DME, sign up for all that stuff. I'm going to be putting a special together plot for my website for all the little trainings we got going on. I'll probably put that out later today. If you want that special code and all that stuff, will be in an email put out. Get as much training as you can. If you're off from your work for a week with the kids, go in the background, learn, listen to the podcast, share the information. All we can do is help. So, with that said, everyone, I have to ask Nathan the final question. What do you see in 6 months?
2025 is looking really good. I think it's shaping up to be a really great year. I'm very curious to see. I'm watching more closely than I have in past years, I want to say, just to see where the housing market's going and what kind of effects that's going to have on what we're doing. I think it's going to be a great year, though. Lots of really good things happening. Lots of different ways that you can get into notes and kind of figure out how they work and how it's going to work for you. It's going to be a great year. So looking forward to it.
Without touching about your big change, you're going to be making an adjustment on some of your investments. I think we're doing the same thing over here. So we're going to adjust. And that's going to be another topic we're going to talk about.
Interesting. Yeah, sounds
we're
good.
Adjusting, right? Because note buying is great, but there are some markets in this industry that are killing it. And we want to be part of it, right?
Yeah.
So till next time, till next year, take care, brother. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.